My 8-year-old son pulled me aside. "Dad, promise you'll stay calm." I nodded, worried. Mommy's friend, the police officer, came to my school. He handed me a sealed envelope. He said to give this only to you. Don't let Mommy see it. I tore it open. It was terrifying. I grabbed my son and drove away as fast as I could. Chapter 1, The Quiet Life. Jack Beck wiped the grease from his hands, staring at the disassembled motorcycle engine spread across his garage workbench. 38 years old, 6'2", with the kind of lean muscle that came from discipline rather than vanity. He'd spent the last decade trying to build something that resembled normal. The scar tissue running along his left forearm, courtesy of a roadside bomb in Kandahar, served as a permanent reminder that normal was a luxury he'd earned the hard way. Dad, you in there?" His son's voice cut through the silence. 8-year-old Kerr had his mother's dark hair and his father's gray eyes that had seemed too much for someone who still believed in Santa Claus. "In the garage, buddy," Jack called back, setting down his wrench. Kurt appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder, but something was off. The kid's usual boundless energy was gone, replaced by something Jack recognized from his years in military intelligence. Fear poorly masked as calm. "How was school?" Jack asked, studying his son's face. "Fine." The word came too quickly. Kurt glanced over his shoulder toward the house. Through the garage's side window, Jack could see his wife Rosie's car in the driveway. She was home early. Jack had met Rosie Dunn 10 years ago at a veteran support group. She'd been a volunteer, warm and patient with broken soldiers, trying to piece themselves back together. They'd married within a year. For a while, it had been good. She'd given him Kurt, given him a reason to wake up without reaching for the bottle. But the last 18 months had opened cracks in the foundation. Late nights at her book club, hush phone calls, a new distance in her eyes. "You sure everything's okay?" Jack crouched down to his son's level. Kurt bit his lip, a habit he'd picked up from Rosie. Can we talk? Just us?" Jack's instincts sharpened. He learned to read people in places where the wrong assessment could cost lives. His son was terrified. "Let's take a walk," Jack said, standing. He called toward the house. "Rosie, taking Kurt to the park for a bit." A muffled acknowledgement came from inside. They didn't wait for more. The park was 3 blocks away, a modest stretch of grass with aging playground equipment. Jack led Kurt to a bench far from the handful of other parents supervising their kids. The afternoon sun cast long shadows, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "Dad," Kurt finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Promise you'll stay calm." Every alarm bell in Jack's mind started ringing. Those were the words people used before delivering devastating news. He'd heard them in briefings before learning about casualties, before receiving divorce papers from soldiers whose marriages hadn't survived deployment. "I promise," Jack said, though his jaw was already tightening. "What's going on?" Kurt reached into his backpack with trembling hands. "Mommy's friend, the police officer. He came to my school today. Harvey Moran." Jack's hands clenched involuntarily. Harvey was a detective with the city police, late 40s, divorced, the kind of cop who'd learned to work the system rather than serve it. He'd been coming around for the last 6 months, supposedly because he and Rosie had gone to high school together. Jack had tolerated it because Rosie insisted they were just old friends, but his gut had been screaming otherwise. "He pulled me out of class," Kurt continued. "Said, he had something for you. Made me promise." His voice cracked. "Made me promise not to tell Mom. Said it was important that you needed to see it first." Kurt pulled out a sealed envelope. It was standard letter size but thick. Jack's name was written across the front in unfamiliar handwriting. Neat, careful, the kind of penmanship that belonged to someone who paid attention to details. "Did Harvey say anything else?" Jack asked, taking the envelope. "He said." Kurt's eyes filled with tears. "He said you'd understand, that you'd know what to do." "Dad, what's happening? Is Mom okay? Are you guys getting divorced?" Jack pulled his son close, feeling the boy's small frame shake against his chest. "Hey, look at me." He tilted Kurt's chin up. "Whatever this is, we'll handle it. You and me." "Okay." Kurt nodded, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. "But I need you to do exactly what Harvey said." Jack continued, keeping his voice steady. "Don't tell your mom about this. Not yet. Can you do that for me?" Another nod. "Good man." Jack ruffled his son's hair, then stood. "Let's get you home. I need to read this." Jack waited until Kurt was inside, safely distracted by video games, before returning to the garage. He locked the door behind him and sat on his workbench stool, studying the envelope under the harsh fluorescent lights. The weight of it was wrong, too heavy for a simple letter. He turned it over, checking for any signs of tampering, then carefully opened it. Inside were 3 items: a handwritten note, a USB drive, and a series of photographs. Jack read the note first. Beck, you don't know me, but I know what's about to happen to you. My name is Neil Alvarado. I'm Harvey Moran's partner. Or I was until 3 days ago. I'm writing this from a hospital bed. Car accident, they'll say brake failure. But I checked those brakes myself the morning it happened. Harvey's dirty. Has been for years. Protection rackets, evidence tampering, the works. I got too close, started asking questions, and now I'm looking at 6 months of physical therapy if I'm lucky. But that's not why I'm writing you. Your wife has been sleeping with Harvey for 8 months. I'm sorry. I know that's not easy to hear, but it's worse than that. They're not just having an affair. They're planning to rob you blind and frame you for something that'll put you away for life. The USB drive has everything I've managed to collect. Bank statements, recorded conversations, Harvey's notes. He's been working with your wife to set up a scheme involving her access to the military veterans fund she manages. They're planning to steal $2.3 million and make it look like you did it. Your military background, your security clearance, your access to her accounts, it's all going to point straight at you. The frame-up goes down in 4 days. They're going to discover the theft, and Harvey will make sure the evidence trail leads to your door. With his badge and your wife's testimony, you won't stand a chance. I couldn't go to Internal Affairs. Harvey's got too many friends there. I couldn't go to the FBI. By the time they investigate, you'll already be arrested and the damage will be done. So, I'm giving you this. What you do with it is your choice. I'd disappear if I were you. Take your kid and run. But if you're the man I think you are, the kind of man who survives Kandahar and comes home to build a life, then maybe you want to fight. If you do, be smart. Harvey's dangerous when cornered. And your wife, she's colder than you think. Good luck, Neil Alvarado. Jack read the note 3 times, his expression never changing. Then he looked at the photographs. They showed Rosie and Harvey together at restaurants in Harvey's car entering a motel on the outskirts of town. The timestamps range from 6 months ago to as recent as 2 days ago. The final photo made his blood run cold. Rosie and Harvey standing in what looked like a bank vault. Both of them smiling at something off camera. Jack set the photos down carefully and picked up the USB drive. His hand was steady, the same steadiness that had served him during firefights and hostage negotiations. Panic was a luxury for people who had the privilege of falling apart. He learned long ago that survival required clarity. He inserted the USB drive into his laptop and opened the files. What he found over the next hour painted a picture of betrayal so calculated, so thorough that it almost impressed him from a tactical standpoint. Harvey had been meticulously documenting a fake trail emails from Jack's computer to offshore accounts, forged signatures, planted evidence in his home office. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Use Jack's military intelligence background and his wife's position to create an unshakable narrative of a desperate veteran turned thief. There were audio recordings, too. Jack played one. Harvey's voice. The beauty of it is everyone will believe it. War hero comes home with PTSD. Can't adjust to civilian life. Sees an opportunity through his wife's work. It writes itself. Roz's voice cold and calculated. What about Kurt? Harvey, what about him? He'll go to your sister. You'll play the devastated wife. Testify against your husband. After the trial, we wait a year, then suddenly your grief turns into something new. We can be together, and with the money and the Caymans, we can live anywhere we want. Rosie, after a pause, and if Jack figures it out before the frame up, Harvey laughing, then we move to plan B, domestic dispute gone wrong. I respond to your 911 call. Find him threatening you with a gun. Clean shoot. Either way, he's gone and we get what we want. Jack closed the laptop. His face remained impassive, but his mind was already working through scenarios, calculating angles, planning moves 3 steps ahead. The same skill set that had kept his team alive in hostile territory. For days until they made their move. For days to dismantle everything they'd built and ensure they paid for it. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 2 years. Merle Lamb. A gruff voice answered. Merle, it's Jack Beck. I need a favor. A big one. There was a pause. Merle had served under Jack in Afghanistan. Saved his life during that roadside bomb. They kept in touch after discharge. Though Merle had gone into a different line of work, private security and investigation for corporate clients. Name it, Merle said simply. I need surveillance equipment, a safe location, and your particular set of skills. And I need it tonight. You in trouble? Not yet, Jack said, looking at the photograph spread across his workbench. But someone's about to be. Chapter 2, The Investigation. Jack Beck spent that night in his garage. The glow of his laptop screen casting sharp shadows across his face. He'd sent Rosie a text claiming he needed to finish an urgent client report, a plausible excuse given his work as a security consultant. She'd responded with a thumbs-up emoji, no questions asked. That alone told him everything about the state of their marriage. By midnight, Merle Lamb arrived in an unmarked van. Merle was built like a bulldog, shorter than Jack, but twice as wide with a shaved head and knuckles scarred from a youth spent boxing in Detroit. He'd traded his military fatigues for expensive suits. But underneath the corporate polish was still the same Marine who dragged Jack from a burning vehicle while taking fire. "You look like hell," Merle said, setting down 2 large equipment cases. "Feel worse?" Jack helped him unload. "Thanks for coming. You said someone's trying to frame you for embezzlement. That the short version?" "That's the generous version." Jack handed him the envelope. "Read it, then we'll talk." While Merle absorbed the contents, Jack pulled up the USB files again. He'd spent hours analyzing them. And something had been bothering him, a detail that didn't fit. "Jesus," Merle muttered, finishing the note. "Your wife and a dirty cop. That's dark even for my line of work. Look at this." Jack pointed to the screen, pulling up a series of bank records. "Neil says they're planning to steal $2.3 million from the Veterans Fund, but these backdated transactions, they show preliminary transfers going back 14 months. Rosie only took over as fund manager 10 months ago." Merle leaned in, eyes narrowing, so either Neil's timeline is wrong or someone else is involved, someone who had access before Rosie. Jack switched to another file, a personnel roster for the Mountain Ridge Veteran Support Foundation where Rosie worked. Her predecessor was a woman named Louise Hughes. She resigned abruptly right before Rosie got the position. No forwarding address, no social media presence since she left. "You think she's part of this?" "I think she's either part of it or she found out and got scared." Jack pulled up a photo of Louise, a severe-looking woman in her 50s with steel gray hair. "Either way, we need to find her." Merle cracked his knuckles. "I'll have my people on it by morning." "What else?" "Harvey Moran." Jack brought up a police personnel file he'd accessed using credentials from his consulting work. Technically a gray area, but he'd stopped caring about technicalities. 17 years on the force, decorated, but look at his financials. He's drowning in debt. Divorce cleaned about 5 years ago, and he's been living beyond his means ever since. That's motive. Classic corruption story. Merle agreed. Needs money. Has access to power. Finds an opportunity. Except I need proof that'll stand up. Neil's evidence is good, but a defense attorney would tear it apart as hearsay from a disgruntled partner. I need Harvey to hang himself. Merle opened one of the equipment cases, revealing an array of surveillance devices. Then let's give him the rope. Over the next 2 days, Jack moved with the precision of a chess player setting pieces on a board. He maintained his routine. Breakfast with Kurt, work calls, dinner with Rosie. While Merle's team worked in the shadows, they planted listening devices in Roz's car and office. They installed miniature cameras in Harvey's apartment building lobby and garage. They tracked both of their movements, building a detailed pattern of their activities. And Jack learned to wear a mask. "You've been quiet lately," Rosie said over dinner on the second night. She'd made lasagna, his favorite, ironically. Or perhaps not ironically. Perhaps it was part of the performance. The devoted wife playing her role until the moment came to destroy him. "Big project at work," Jack replied, cutting into his food. Across the table, Kurt was pushing food around his plate, shooting nervous glances at his father. "Nothing to worry about," Rosie smiled. It was the same smile she'd given him when they'd married. But now Jack could see the calculation behind it. How long had she been acting? When had the woman he'd loved become this? "I've been thinking," she said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. Her fingers were cold. "Maybe we should plan a vacation. Just the 3 of us. Get away for a while." After the frame up, Jack thought but didn't say. Instead, he squeezed her hand and forced warmth into his voice. "That sounds nice. What are you thinking?" "Somewhere warm. Caribbean, maybe." She was testing him. He realized, looking for any sign that he knew. "Let me finish this project first," he said. "Then we'll talk about it." That night, after Rosie was asleep, Jack slipped out to meet Merle at a diner on the edge of town. It was nearly 2 o'clock in the morning, and the place was empty, except for a tired waitress and a trucker nursing black coffee. "We got something," Merle said, sliding a tablet across the table. "Your wife met with someone this afternoon." "Not Harvey." Jack looked at the surveillance photo. It showed Rosie sitting in a park with a man Jack didn't recognize. Mid-30s, expensive suit, the kind of polished appearance that suggested money and influence. Who is he? Julian Parker, lawyer, corporate type. But here's where it gets interesting. Merle swiped to another image. He also represents Harvey Moran in his divorce proceedings. And get this, he's the registered agent for 3 shell companies in the Cayman Islands. Shell companies that received wire transfers from the Veterans Fund over the last year. Jack felt the pieces clicking into place. So, it's not just Harvey and Rosie. Parker's the money man. He's been helping them set up the offshore accounts. More than that, Merle pulled up another file. Remember Louise Hughes, the former fund manager? I found her. She's living under a different name in Oregon. My contact up there had a conversation with her this morning. She's willing to talk and she says Julian Parker approached her 2 years ago. Wanted her to help skim money from the fund. When she refused, she started receiving threats. Anonymous letters, dead rats in her mailbox, the works. She quit and ran. Jack's jaw tightened, so they needed someone they could control. Enter Rosie. Looks like it. Harvey probably vouched for her. Told Parker she could be manipulated. The affair was icing on the cake. Gave them another layer of control. Jack stared at the photo of Julian Parker. Here was the puppet master, the one pulling Harvey and Rosie strings. And suddenly the scope of this thing became clear. This wasn't just about stealing from Veterans Fund. This was a systematic operation and he'd become a convenient scapegoat. There's something else. Merle said quietly. Neil Alvarado, I visited him in the hospital today. How is he? Bad. Real bad. But he told me something he didn't put in the note. Merle hesitated. Harvey's plan B, the one where he shows up and shoots you during a domestic disturbance. Parker's been pushing for that from a start, says it's cleaner, less chance of exposure. Harvey's been resisting because he doesn't want to risk an investigation into the shooting, but Parker's getting impatient. Jack's expression didn't change, but his mind was already adjusting his timeline. If Parker was pushing Harvey to move to violence, then the 4-day window might be optimistic. We need to accelerate, Jack said. How fast can you give me a meeting with Louise Hughes? She's already on a plane. She'll be here tomorrow morning. Good. Jack pulled out his phone and opened a notes app. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to let them think their plan is working. We're going to give them exactly what they want right up until the moment we take everything from them. Merle grinned. It was not a pleasant expression. Now you're talking my language. Chapter 3. The Trap. Louise Hughes looked like a woman who'd spent 2 years glancing over her shoulder. She sat across from Jack and Merle's office, a nondescript building in an industrial park, wringing her hands and jumping at every sound from the street outside. Thank you for coming, Jack said, keeping his voice gentle. He'd interviewed enough traumatized witnesses to know that Louise needed reassurance, not interrogation. I almost didn't, she admitted. Her voice was raspy from years of smoking. When your friend found me, I thought they'd sent someone to finish what they started. They don't know you're here. You're safe. Louise laughed bitterly. Am I? You don't know these people. Julian Parker. He's not just some lawyer. He's got connections. Police, judges, politicians. That's how he knew he could get away with this. Tell me everything, Jack said. Start from the beginning. Over the next hour, Louise painted a picture of systematic corruption. Julian Parker had been operating his scheme for years, moving money through the Veterans Fund and other nonprofit organizations he'd infiltrated. The amounts were always small enough to avoid immediate detection, but over time they added up to millions. He approached me at a fundraising gala, Louise said. Very smooth, very charming. Said he was impressed with my work, that he wanted to help the foundation grow. Next thing I knew, he was suggesting creative accounting to maximize our resources. When I realized what he was really proposing, I tried to back out. That's when the threat started. She nodded. At first, it was subtle. Hang-up calls, my car getting keyed. Then it escalated. Someone broke into my house while I was sleeping and left a note on my pillow. It said, "Next time you won't wake up." That's when I knew I had to disappear. Why didn't you go to the police? Louise's laugh was hollow. Because Harvey Moran was one of the people threatening me. He showed up at my house in uniform. Told me that if I made any accusations, he'd make sure I was the one who got investigated. With his badge and Parker's lawyers, who would believe me? Jack glanced at Merle, who was recording the conversation. This was gold, but it still wasn't enough. They needed something that would crack the whole operation open. Louise, Jack said carefully. Do you still have any documentation? Anything that could prove Parker's involvement? She reached in her purse and pulled out a USB drive. I kept copies of everything. Bank statements, emails, memos. I was too scared to use them, but I couldn't bring myself to destroy them either. Jack took the drive like it was made of gold. This is exactly what we need. What are you going to do? Louise asked. I'm going to give them what they want, Jack said. And then I'm going to destroy them. That afternoon, Jack put the first phase of his counter-operation into motion. He created a series of digital breadcrumbs, emails from his computer to offshore accounts, searches for money laundering techniques in his browser history, encrypted files on his hard drive that would look damning if discovered. It was a mirror image of the frame update plan for him, except he was building it himself with one crucial difference. He had detailed documentation of every step timestamped and stored with Merle's security team. You're making yourself look guilty, Merle observed as he watched Jack work. That's the idea. When they come for me, they're going to find exactly what they expect. But here's the thing. The evidence is too good, too perfect. Any decent forensic accountant will be able to tell it was planted, and you're betting they won't look that closely. I'm betting their arrogance won't let them consider that possibility. Jack typed another line of code. Harvey and Rosie think they're the ones running a con. Parker thinks he's untouchable. None of them will believe I could outplay them. Merle shook his head admiringly. You're a cold son of a, you know that. I learned from the best. Jack had spent years in military intelligence learning how to run double agents, how to turn enemies' strengths into weaknesses. This was just another operation, except the stakes were personal. That evening, Jack took Kurt to the movies, a superhero film the kid had been begging to see. They ate too much popcorn and laughed at the action sequences, and for 2 hours, Jack let himself pretend everything was normal. Dad, Kurt said as they walked back to the car. Are you and Mom going to be okay? Jack stopped, crouching down to his son's eye level. The parking lot lights cast long shadows across the boy's worried face. I need you to trust me, Jack said. Things are going to get complicated for a little while. But I promise you, no matter what happens, no matter what anyone says, I'm going to make sure you're safe and taken care of. Okay. Kurt threw his arms around his father's neck. I love you, Dad. I love you, too, buddy. Jack held his son tight, feeling the weight of what was coming. Then he stood, taking Kurt's hand. Come on, let's get home. The next morning, exactly 4 days after Jack had received Neil Alvarado's envelope, everything came to a head. Jack was in his home office when he heard car doors slamming outside. Through the window, he saw Harvey Moran and 3 other police officers approaching his house. Right on schedule. Rosie appeared in the office doorway. Her face a mask of concern. Jack, there are police here. What's going on? Jack looked at his wife. Really looked at her. Had she always been capable of this level of deception? Or had desperation turned her into someone new? I don't know, he said. And in that moment, he gave her one last chance. Rosie, if there's something you need to tell me, anything at all, now would be the time. For just a second, something flickered in her eyes. Doubt, guilt, but then it was gone, replaced by perfect confusion. What are you talking about? The doorbell rang. Jack stood, straightening his shoulders. Let them in. Harvey Moran filled the doorway, his badge prominently displayed. 3 uniformed officers flanked him, hands resting casually near their weapons. Jack Beck. Harvey's voice was professionally neutral, but Jack could see the anticipation in his eyes. This was it. The moment Harvey had been planning for. That's me. I have a warrant for your arrest. Embezzlement and wire fraud. Harvey pulled out handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. This is insane. Roz's performance was flawless. Shock, indignation, fear. If Jack hadn't known better, he might have believed her. There must be some mistake. Ma'am, we have evidence that your husband has been stealing from the veterans fund your organization manages. Over $2 million transferred to offshore accounts. That's impossible. Jack would never. The transfers were initiated from his computer, Harvey continued stone-faced. We have email records, digital signatures, everything we need. I'm sorry, Mrs. Beck, but your husband is facing serious federal charges. Jack extended his hands for the cuffs. As Harvey snapped them closed, Jack leaned in slightly and whispered, "How's Neil doing?" Harvey's face went blank for just a fraction of a second. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but Jack saw it. So the moment Harvey realized something was wrong. I don't know what you're talking about, Harvey said, but his voice had lost its certainty. No. Jack smiled, a cold, predatory expression. That's interesting because I have a lot to talk about and I think you're going to want to hear every word. As they led him out to the patrol car, Jack glanced back at his house. Kurt was watching from an upstairs window, his small face pressed against the glass. Jack gave him a subtle nod. Everything was going according to plan. The trap had been set. Now it was time to spring it. Chapter 4. The Gambit. The interrogation room was deliberately uncomfortable. Metal chairs, fluorescent lights, one-way mirror. Jack had been sitting there for 6 hours, occasionally visited by various detectives trying to get him to talk. He'd said nothing except to request his lawyer. What the police didn't know was that his lawyer was actually a federal agent Merle had connections with, a woman named Candace Terry from the FBI's white-collar crime division. She'd been investigating Julian Parker for 3 years on unrelated charges and was very interested in what Jack had to offer. When Candace finally entered the interrogation room, she played her part perfectly. Mid-40s, sharp suit, briefcase, the image of a corporate defense attorney. "Mr. Beck, I'm Candace Terry. Your friend Merle Lamb retained my services." She set her briefcase on the table and turned to the detective who escorted her in. "I need time with my client alone." The detective hesitated. "We have questions and Mr. Beck will answer them in due time after he's consulted with counsel unless you'd like me to start filing motions about improper procedure." The detective left, but Jack knew Harvey Moran would be watching from behind the mirror. Candace sat down and pulled out a legal pad purely for show. What she actually slid across to Jack was a small electronic device that would scramble any listening equipment. "We're clear," she said quietly. "You have about 10 minutes before they get suspicious." Jack leaned forward. "How much did Merle tell you?" "Everything. And I've been making calls." "Your evidence checks out. Julian Parker is dirty. Harvey Moran is dirty. And your wife is in the middle of it. But here's the problem. The frame-up is good. Really good. If we go to trial based solely on Neil Alvarado's testimony and Louise Hughes's records, a jury might not buy it. What do you need?" "I need one of them a flip. Preferably Harvey. He's the weak link. Parker's too smart and too insulated." "And your wife?" Candace paused. "Your wife is cold enough that I don't think she'll break under pressure." Jack had already come to the same conclusion. "So, we make Harvey flip." "Ow." "By convincing him that Parker's about to throw him under the bus." Jack pulled out a photo from Candace's briefcase, one they prepared in advance. It showed Julian Parker meeting with another man at a coffee shop. "This is Santos Shaw, an attorney who specializes in negotiating plea deals. Merle had them photographed together this morning. Harvey doesn't know Santos is actually one of your undercover agents." Candace smiled slowly. "You want to make Harvey think Parker is cutting a deal without him." "Exactly. Harvey is smart enough to know that in any conspiracy, the first person to cooperate gets the best deal. If he thinks Parker is about to leave him holding the bag, he'll race to the FBI to save himself." "And what about your wife?" Jack's expression hardened. "Leave her to me." They put the plan in motion immediately. Candace arranged for Jack to be released on bail. "Surprisingly easy," she explained. "When you have an FBI agent pulling strings." Harvey was furious. Jack learned later, but he couldn't override a federal agent without raising questions. Jack went home to find Rosie waiting. She played the concerned wife perfectly, even posting on social media about the terrible misunderstanding and how she stood by her husband. It was a masterful performance. "Jack," she threw her arms around him as soon as he walked in the door. "Thank God. I've been so worried. Your lawyer says this is all a mistake. That someone must have hacked your computer." "Where's Kurt?" Jack interrupted. "And my sisters, I thought it would be better if he didn't. If he wasn't here for all this." She pulled back, studying his face. "Are you okay? You seem what?" "Different." There was something in her eyes now. Uncertainty. She was trying to read him, trying to figure out if he suspected anything. "I've been arrested for a crime." "I didn't commit," Jack said flatly. "Different feels appropriate." They stared at each other, and Jack wondered if she could see through his mask the way he'd learned to see through hers. For a moment, he almost wished she would confess, that she would give him some explanation that made sense. But then the moment passed and she turned away. "I made dinner," she said. "You must be hungry." They ate in silence. Jack watched Rosie push food around her plate, saw the way she checked her phone every few minutes. She was texting someone, probably Harvey, probably panicking that their carefully constructed plan was falling apart. After dinner, Jack excused himself to his office. He had work to do. At midnight, Jack received a text from Merle. "Package delivered." The package was a carefully crafted piece of disinformation. Through a series of anonymous tips and leaked documents, they'd made sure Harvey saw photos of Julian Parker meeting with Santos Shaw. They'd included transcripts of fake conversations suggesting Parker was negotiating immunity in exchange for testifying against his co-conspirators. The bait was set now, but they had to wait. They didn't wait long. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Jack's burner phone rang. It was Candace Terry. Harvey just walked in the FBI field office. She said he's asking to make a deal. Jack felt a surge of satisfaction. Don't make it easy for him. Make him earn it. Oh, don't worry. We're going to squeeze every drop out of him. Jack hung up and allowed himself a small smile. Phase 1 was complete. Harvey was about to give them everything they needed to take down Julian Parker, which left only one loose end. Rosie. Jack found her in their bedroom, awake and staring at her phone. When she saw him, she quickly locked the screen. Can't sleep? He asked. No. Her voice was tight. This whole thing, it's been a nightmare. Has it? Jack sat on the edge of the bed. Rosie, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. She tensed. What? Are you having an affair? The question hung in the air between them. Jack watched her face cycle through emotions. Surprise, indignation, fear before settling on something like sorrow. Jack, why would you ask me that? Because I've been paying attention. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way you look at me like I'm someone you're trying to figure out rather than someone you love. For a moment, he thought she might actually tell the truth. But then she shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. I'm not having an affair, she said. I love you. I know things have been strange lately, but that's because she hesitated because I've been worried about you, about us. I thought maybe we were drifting apart, and I didn't know how to fix it. It was a good lie. If Jack hadn't known better, he might have believed it. Okay, he said simply. I believe you. Relief flooded her face. Thank you, Jack. I promise. But I need you to do something for me. He pulled out a document. Divorce papers he'd had Merle draw up. I need you to sign these. Her relief evaporated. What? Why? Because if I'm going to beat these charges, I can't have my personal life complicating things. My lawyer says it'll look better if we're legally separated. Shows the prosecution they can't use you against me. It was complete nonsense, of course, but Rosie didn't know enough about legal strategy to question it. Jack, I don't want to get divorced. It's temporary, just until this is over. Please, Rosie, I need you to trust me. She stared at the papers, her mind clearly racing. Jack could see her weighing options, calculating angles. Finally, she picked up a pen. For you, she said, signing her name. Because I love you, Jack took the papers, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. Thank you. This will make everything easier. He left the bedroom before she could see his expression. Chapter 5, The Confession. Harvey Moran's cooperation was a beautiful thing to watch. Over the next 48 hours, he gave the FBI everything. Detailed records of the embezzlement scheme, evidence of Julian Parker's criminal network, testimony about how they planned to frame Jack. But Candace Terry wanted more. She wanted Harvey to wear a wire. Parker doesn't know I've flipped yet, Harvey explained during a meeting at the FBI field office. Jack was there watching through a video feed from another room. He's been calling me, wanted to meet, says we need to discuss damage control, then meet with him. Candace said get him to implicate himself on tape. He's not stupid. If I wear a wire and he finds it, he won't find it. She slid a tiny device across the table. Latest technology, completely undetectable, and we'll have agents positioned nearby in case things go south. Harvey picked up the device, his hand shaking slightly. For all his corruption, he wasn't a brave man, just a greedy one who'd gotten it over his head. What about Rosie? Harvey asked. Is she cooperating? Not yet, Candace said. But she will. Through the video feed, Jack watched Harvey's face carefully. There was something there. Not quite guilt, but close. A hint of conscience buried under layers of justification and self-preservation. She's not a bad person, Harvey said quietly. She got desperate. Her gambling debts were crushing her, and Parker knew it. He used it against her, promised he could make her problems disappear if she helped him access the Veterans Fund. Jack's hands clenched. He hadn't known about gambling debts. Rosie had hidden them well. And you? Candace asked. What's your excuse? Harvey laughed bitterly. Same as everyone. I guess I needed money. Parker offered it. I told myself it was just this once, just to get back on my feet after the divorce. But one time became two, two became three. He shook his head. You ever notice how easy it is to justify things to yourself? By the end, I'd convinced myself I wasn't really hurting anyone. It was just money from a fund that had plenty. Veterans were still getting their benefits. No real harm done. Except you were planning to frame an innocent man. Candace said coldly. That was Parker's idea. I didn't want to, but you went along with it. You were ready to destroy Jack Beck's life. Send him to prison, traumatize his son, and for what? Money. Harvey had no answer to that. Watching from the other room, Jack felt a strange absence of anger. He'd expected to feel rage at Harvey's admissions, but instead there was only a cold calculation. Harvey was a tool useful for taking down Parker and building the case against Rosie, but ultimately just another corrupt cop who'd made bad choices. The real anger Jack felt was reserved for Rosie. She'd gambled away their security, lied to him for months, planned to destroy him, and through it all, she'd smiled and pretended to be the loving wife. That kind of betrayal deserves something special. The meeting between Harvey and Julian Parker took place in an upscale restaurant downtown. Harvey wore the FBI's wire, and a team of agents watched from various positions, some posing as diners, others positioned in a surveillance vent outside. Jack listened to the feed from Candace's office. Merle standing beside him. "Can't believe they let Beck out on bail." Parker's smooth voice came through the speakers. "That's unexpected." "His lawyer's good," Harvey replied. Jack could hear the tension in his voice. "Federal agent, apparently. She's already poking holes in the evidence." "That's impossible. We covered everything." "Did we? Because I'm starting to think maybe we rushed this. Maybe we should have waited, been more careful." There was a pause. Jack imagined Parker studying Harvey, trying to read him. "You're not getting cold feet. Are you, Harvey?" Parker's tone had shifted. Friendly exterior stripped away to reveal something harder underneath. "I'm being realistic. If Beck's lawyer finds even one thread to pull, the whole thing could unravel. And if it does, we stick to the plan. We have documentation. We have evidence. We have everything we need. Beck's military background makes him the perfect scapegoat. Even if he fights the charges, the publicity alone will destroy him. And what about Rosie? What about her? She plays the devastated wife, helps the prosecution, and after Beck's convicted, she gets her share of the money. Everyone wins except Beck." "Except Beck." Parker agreed. "But that's his problem, not ours. Harvey, listen to me. You're a soldier in this. You follow orders, you do your job, and you get paid. That's how this works. Don't start developing a conscience now." In Candace's office, Jack listened to Parker condemn himself with every word. The FBI agent was smiling. "We've got him," she said. "Parker just confessed to conspiracy, fraud, and intent to frame you. That's enough to arrest him tonight." "Do it," Jack said. Merle clapped him on the shoulder. "One down, one to go." Jack nodded, but his mind was already on the next phase. Julian Parker's arrest would panic Rosie, make her realize that her carefully constructed scheme was collapsing. And in that panic, she would make mistakes. Mistakes Jack fully intended to exploit. Chapter 6. The Confrontation. Julian Parker was arrested at his home at 3 o'clock in the morning. The FBI executed search warrants simultaneously at his office, his vacation house in Aspen, and his safe deposit boxes. By sunrise, the news was everywhere. Prominent lawyer arrested in massive embezzlement scheme. Jack watched the coverage from his garage, drinking coffee and waiting. He didn't have to wait long. At 6:30, Rosie burst into the garage, still in her pajamas, her phone clutched in her hand. "Did you see the news? Julian Parker was arrested. They're saying he stole millions from nonprofit organizations. That he was running some kind of criminal enterprise." She stopped studying Jack's calm expression. "You don't seem surprised." "Should I be? Jack, what's going on? First, you get arrested. Now, Parker, is there some connection I'm not seeing?" Jack set down his coffee mug. This was the moment he'd been planning for. "Rosie, I need you to be very careful about what you say next." Her face palled. "What are you talking about?" "Julian Parker is naming co-conspirators. Harvey Moran is cooperating with the FBI and the walls are closing in." Jack pulled out his phone and played one of the recordings from Harvey's wire. Parker's voice filled the garage. "Rosie plays the devastated wife helps the prosecution." Roz's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, 8 months, Jack said, his voice eerily calm. "You've been planning this for 8 months. The affair, the embezzlement, the frame-up, all of it." "Jack, I can explain." "Can you? Because I'd love to hear how you explain planning to send me to prison for a crime you committed. How you explain sleeping with a corrupt cop while pretending to be my wife. How you explain being willing to destroy our son's father." Tears were streaming down Roz's face. "Now, I didn't want to. You don't understand. I had debts. Horrible debts. And Parker said he could help. That it would be easy, that no one would get hurt. No one would get hurt." Jack's composure cracked slightly. "You're going to send me to federal prison. You were going to traumatize Kurt. You were going to destroy everything I've built. I'm sorry." Rosie was sobbing now. I'm so sorry, Jack. I made terrible mistakes. I got in too deep and I didn't know how to get out. So, you decided to sacrifice me instead. Jack stood looming over her. Here's what's going to happen now, Rosie. You're going to cooperate with the FBI. You're going to testify against Parker and Harvey. You're going to admit everything you've done. They'll send me to prison. Yes, they will. But if you cooperate, maybe you'll get a reduced sentence. Maybe you'll be out while Kurt is still young enough to know you. And if I don't cooperate, Jack's smile was cold. Then I make sure you get the maximum sentence. I have evidence you don't even know about. Recordings, documents, testimony from Louise Hughes. I have enough to bear you. So deep you'll never see sunlight again. Your choice. Rosie sank into a chair, her body shaking with sobs. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you, but you did. Jack felt no sympathy, only a hollow satisfaction. You made your choices, Rosie. Now you get to live with the consequences. What about Kurt? Kurt will be fine. He'll live with me. He'll have a father who loves him and tells him the truth. And maybe someday, if you're lucky, he'll forgive you. Jack, please. My lawyer will be in touch about your cooperation agreement. Jack walked toward the garage door. I suggest you get a good attorney. You're going to need one. He left her there crying in his garage and felt absolutely nothing. Chapter 7. The Dominoes. The investigation moved with the speed and force of an avalanche. Once Harvey and Rosie both agreed to cooperate, federal agents tore through Julian Parker's empire, finding evidence of not just the Veterans Fund scheme, but a dozen other frauds spanning years. Jack watched it all unfold from a distance, focusing on rebuilding his life. He'd taken extended leave from his consulting job and was spending every possible moment with Kurt, trying to shield him from the worst of the fallout while being honest about what had happened. Is Mom go to jail? Kurt asked one evening as they sat on the back porch watching the sunset. Yes, Jack said. There was no point in lying. She did some very bad things and she has to face consequences. Did she stop loving us? Jack pulled his son close. I don't know, buddy. I think maybe she got lost, made some really bad choices, and couldn't find her way back. Do you still love her? It was a question Jack had asked himself countless times over the past weeks. I love the person I thought she was. The person I married, but that person, I don't think she exists anymore. Kurt was quiet for a long moment. I'm glad you found out about all of it. If you hadn't, he didn't finish the sentence. I know, Jack said softly. But I did find out, and I'm never going to let anyone hurt you like that. That's a promise. 3 weeks after Julian Parker's arrest, the full scope of his operation became public. It turned out the Veterans Fund was just one of 7 nonprofit organizations he'd infiltrated and defrauded over the years. The total amount stolen exceeded $15 million. But it was a human cost that made headlines. One organization he targeted provided housing for homeless veterans. His theft had forced them to close their facility, putting dozens of vulnerable people back on the streets. Another provided medical assistance to veterans suffering from PTSD. Parker's fraud had eliminated their entire operating budget. As these stories emerged, public opinion turned viciously against everyone involved in the scheme. Harvey Moran became the face of police corruption. Rosie became the ultimate betrayer. The woman who'd stolen from the very people she was supposed to help. And Jack became something of a folk hero. The veteran who'd been targeted by a massive conspiracy and fought back using intelligence and determination rather than violence. He hated it. You did good. Merle told him over beers one evening at a quiet bar far from the media circus. You took down 3 major criminals and exposed a massive fraud operation. That's worth celebrating. I didn't do it to be a hero, Jack said. I did it because they tried to destroy my life. Still counts. Merle raised his glass. To justice, to survival, Jack corrected, clinking bottles. They drank in silence for a moment before Merle spoke again. What are you going to do now? The FBI is offering you a consulting position. Counter-fraud investigation says your skills will be valuable. Jack had received that offer. He'd also received offers from 3 private security firms, 2 news networks wanting to interview him, and a book publisher interested in his story. He turned them all down. I'm going to be a father, Jack said simply. Kurt's going to need me more than ever once Rosie sentenced. Everything else, it can wait. Merle nodded approvingly. Smart man. I try. Jack took another drink. What about you? Still chasing corrupt executives for corporate clients? Actually, I've been thinking about making a change. Merle grinned. Candace Terry offered me a position with the FBI's white-collar crime unit. Apparently, my particular skill set is in demand. You'd be good at it. High praise coming from you. They finished their beers in comfortable silence. Two soldiers who'd survived different kinds of warfare and come out the other side. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. Julian Parker's trial was a media spectacle. The prosecution had an embarrassment of riches. Harvey's recordings, Rosie's testimony, Louise Hughes's documentation, and mountains of financial evidence. Parker's defense team fought hard, but they were doomed from the start. Jack attended every day of the trial, sitting in the gallery and watching justice grind forward. He wanted Parker to see him. Wanted the lawyer to know that the man he tried to destroy was still standing. On the witness stand, Rosie looked small and broken. She testified in a monotone voice detailing her involvement in the scheme, her affair with Harvey, the plan to frame Jack. The jury watched her with undisguised disgust. Mrs. Beck, the prosecutor asked, "Why did you agree to participate in this scheme?" Roz's voice was barely audible. "I had gambling debts over $300,000. Parker found out and said he could make them disappear if I helped him access the Veterans Fund. I was desperate in framing your husband." "Whose idea was that?" "Parker's. He said we needed someone to take the fall if anything went wrong. He chose Jack because of his military background and security clearance. Said it would be believable that a veteran with PTSD might steal from other veterans." "Did you object to this plan?" A long pause. "No." "Why not?" "Because," Roz's voice broke. "Because by that point, I convinced myself Jack would be fine. That he was smart enough to beat the charges or that Harvey would make sure the evidence wasn't too strong. I told myself lies so I could live with what I was doing. And now I know I'm a coward and a terrible person. I destroyed my family. I betrayed the man who loved me. I stole from people who needed help, and I have to live with that for the rest of my life." It was the most honest thing Jack had heard her say in months. Not that it changed anything. Harvey testified next. His police career in ruins, facing his own federal charges despite his cooperation. He described how Parker had recruited him, how the scheme had evolved, how they'd manufactured evidence against Jack. "Did you ever consider that what you were doing was wrong?" the prosecutor asked. "Every day," Harvey said flatly. "But I did anyway. That's the thing about corruption. It doesn't happen all at once. It's a series of small compromises, each one easier than the last, until you wake up one day and realize you've become everything you swore to fight against." When Louise Hughes took the stand, her testimony was damning. She described Parker's intimidation tactics in detail, producing evidence of threats and harassment that went back years. The jury looked horrified. Finally, Parker himself testified. He was polished and confident, denying everything despite the mountain of evidence against him. He portrayed himself as a victim of overzealous prosecution. Claimed Harvey and Rosie were lying to save themselves, suggested Jack had manufactured evidence out of revenge. It was a masterful performance. It was also completely ineffective. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Julian Parker's face showed no emotion as the verdict was read, but Jack saw his hands clench on the defense table. The judge remanded him to custody immediately and his federal marshals led him away. Parker's eyes found Jack in the gallery. There was no remorse in that gaze, only cold calculation, as if Parker was already planning his appeal. His next move, his eventual revenge. Jack stared back, unflinching. Let Parker plot all he wanted. He'd still spend the next 20 years in a federal prison. Outside the courthouse, Jack was mobbed by reporters. He gave him nothing. Just walked his car where Kurt was waiting with Merle. "Is it over?" Kurt asked. "Almost," Jack said. "One more thing." Chapter 9. The Aftermath. Rosie's sentencing hearing was scheduled for a month after Parker's conviction. In the interim, Jack finalized the divorce, established sole custody of Kurt, and began the slow process of rebuilding their lives. The house felt different without Rosie. Emptier, but somehow more honest. Jack and Kurt established new routines, new traditions. They started having breakfast together every morning, really talking rather than just going through the motions. Kurt joined a youth baseball league, and Jack never missed a game. Slowly, the media attention faded. Other scandals captured the public's interest. Life moved on. On the day of Roz's sentencing, Jack brought Kurt to the courthouse. The boy deserved to see the end of this chapter to understand that actions had consequences. Rosie stood before the judge, her lawyer beside her. She lost weight, looked years older than she had just months ago. When her eyes found Jack and Kurt in the gallery, she began to cry. The judge was not impressed. "Mrs. Beck, you have pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. The prosecution has recommended a sentence of 5 to 7 years in federal prison in exchange for your cooperation. However, I must consider the nature of your crimes." The judge looked down at his notes. You stole from a fund designed to help veterans, the very people you were entrusted to serve. You participated in a scheme to frame your innocent husband for your crimes. You showed no remorse until you were caught. These are not the actions of someone who made a simple mistake. These are the actions of someone who systematically betrayed every person who trusted them. Rosie was sobbing now, her lawyer trying to steady her. However, the judge continued, I also note your cooperation with federal authorities, which helped bring down a larger criminal enterprise. I note your previously clean record and your expressed remorse. He paused, letting the tension build. I hereby sentence you to 6 years in federal prison followed by 3 years of supervised release. You will also pay restitution in the amount of your portion of the stolen funds plus additional fines to be determined. You are remanded to custody immediately to begin serving your sentence. Rosie collapsed. Marshals had to support her as they led her away. As she passed Jack and Kurt, she whispered, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Jack said nothing. Kurt squeezed his father's hand tightly. Outside the courthouse, away from reporters and cameras, father and son sat on a bench in the autumn sunshine. How do you feel? Jack asked. Kurt thought about it. Sad, but also okay. Is that weird? No, buddy. It's not weird at all. Do you think Mom will be different when she gets out? Better? I don't know, Jack admitted. I hope so. For her sake, if not for ours. Will we visit her? In prison, Jack pulled his son close. That's up to you. If you want to, we will. If you don't, that's okay, too. No pressure either way. They sat in silence for a while, watching people walk by. Lawyers and defendants, families and reporters, the endless flow of humanity through the justice system. Dad, Kurt said eventually. Yeah. Thank you for protecting us, for figuring everything out. Jack felt something tight in his chest loosen. Always, kid. That's my job, protecting you. You're really good at it. I try. Jack stood, offering his hand. Come on, let's go home. 6 months later, Jack stood in his garage working on the motorcycle he'd never quite finished. The engine was finally assembled, the chrome polished, the leather seat restored. It was beautiful, a testament to patience and careful craftsmanship. Kurt was at a friend's house. Merle was starting his new job with the FBI next week. Neil Alvarado had completed his physical therapy and returned to active duty with the police department. Harvey's position, ironically. Louise Hughes had used her testimony and the publicity to launch a nonprofit focused on protecting whistleblowers in the charity sector. And Jack was finally breathing. The nightmares had stopped. The constant vigilance had eased. He could sleep through the night again. Could laugh at stupid jokes. Could imagine a future that looked like something other than a battlefield. His phone buzzed. A text from Candace Terry. Coffee next week. Have a case that might interest you. Nothing too intense. Just a financial discrepancy that needs someone with your particular skills. Jack smiled. Maybe he would take that consulting job after all. Not because he needed to be a hero or because he was trying to prove something, but because he was good at it. Because he could help people. Because sometimes the skills you learned in darkness could be used to bring light. He texted back, send me the details. Then he returned to his motorcycle, his hands steady and sure, building something that would carry him forward into whatever came next. Because that's what survivors did. They rebuilt. They moved forward. They found ways to turn their scars into armor and their pain into purpose. Jack Beck had been tested in ways most people couldn't imagine. He'd faced betrayal, corruption, and a conspiracy designed to destroy him. And he'd won, not through violence or revenge, but through intelligence, determination, and a simple refusal to let evil people write his story. The motorcycle's engine rumbled to life, perfectly tuned. Jack smiled. It was a good sound. The sound of something fixed. The sound of new beginning. The sound of victory.